Hi, Thomas. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Is it Nick or Nicolette? What do you prefer?
Nick, it's fine.
Yeah.
I hear some people throw Nicola and me as well, so it's fine. Both.
Okay, cool. I'll probably do both. I'm doing great. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for saying yes. I am doing great, although albeit hot right now in Malaysia. It's 1st of July for me, but nothing that I can complain. So thank you so much for saying yes to be interviewed today. For our listeners, my name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again. The juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, Thomas, I'd like to read a bit of an introduction for our listeners before we get right into our conversation. So, hey everyone, we have Thomas Brown here with us. Thomas lost his brother to suicide in 2001. After a decade of grief, uncertainty, and confusion, he decided he needed to change. So in 2012, along with a friend who had also lost a brother to suicide, he set out on a cross country bicycle tour for suicide awareness and the healing power of art. They started on the northern edge of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and ended up in Wappingers Falls, New York. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Did a great
At the
job.
Chapel of Sacred Mirror. Thank you. The Art Retreat Center of Artists, Alex and Allyson Grey. Since his return, he has spent 3 years as a group facilitator for a local mental health facility, helping others who have lost loved ones to suicide. In 2015, he launched a podcast called Inner Monologue, a conversational interview show where others share their journeys of trials and tribulations. I love it. Recently, he published his book 2012, A Bicycle Odyssey, which tells the tale of his cross country adventure. Wow, so much to unpack. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you. Um,
So,
yeah. Um,
can you share with us, Thomas, before we get into the nitty-gritty of things? Like, what was it like growing up as a Thomas Brown?
I don't know. I can't really complain too much about my childhood. We had like there was some family dynamics being the youngest of the household. It was just my brother and I, and my mom and my dad. I had shelter provided for me, clothing on my back, food on the table. We were probably like lower middle class income family. I would say that as I was getting older, I learned more of the nuance of my family dynamic and some of the things that my parents were simple people from a small town in Kansas, and then they reunited when they were in Phoenix, which is a much bigger city, and it was just like a weed. It kept on growing and growing and growing outwards. The my brother and I growing up in an environment that was radically different from my parents. I just don't think my parents knew how to like process all the new changing technology and what my brother and I were engaging with. But as I was getting older, my brother was a very domineering person, and he kind of had more control over the household than even my parents did. And before I graduated from high school, him and I started butting heads a lot because of that. And it wasn't probably until 6 years later, right before he died from suicide, that him and I started to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't anything like serious. We never got into any fights, but I just didn't really feel comfortable having my brother try to treat me like he was my father. And so I was like, I'm out. I'm moving out. I'm not hanging out with you guys. I was kind of like more of the black sheep of the family, which I didn't go out and like get crazy or anything like that, but I was much more rebellious. Just in terms of like family traditions. I took care of all of my own stuff. I experimented with a lot of drugs, but I was a very responsible drug user in my early 20s and late teens. Responsible meaning like I never hurt anybody, I never got hurt, I never lost a job, I never had to like steal money or things to sell for a fix. It was just kind of like recreational experimentation. But other than that, I was pretty responsible in taking care of myself. I just didn't like associating unless I really had to for family events with my family until my brother. I don't know if that answers your question. It was just like
Yes,
realizing
yes,
that
it
like
did.
once
Um,
go ahead. Sorry.
no, I think our listeners are like, okay, so I'm gonna give you some seconds to for me to start because there's a bit
Okay.
of, obviously there's a bit of a delay here, but yeah,
Okay.
we'll get past that. Sorry, you were saying, please continue. Because we've
Well, I
got
just
time, so.
it wasn't like it wasn't really like a bad, like I just didn't like the fact that my brother was running the household when I wanted my parents to. So I just disassociated myself. I felt like that was kind of like toxic behavior. And, when my brother died, it kind of brought me and my parents back together. Before he died, like the last few months, him and I started to uh, reconcile our differences. So we did have much more of a positive relationship. I didn't expect, none of us expected that he was on his way out or that he was even suffering from depression because he kept a lot of that to himself. So I don't know if it was premeditated just for him to like, I need to reconcile with my younger brother because I don't like who I am and I don't like where I'm at in life. And any day could be my last day. I don't know. I don't have the answers to that, but it was nice to like for the last few months of his life to actually have my brother back. And then once he was gone, it brought me and my parents closer together.
This is such a tough subject for me, um, and I'm sure it is for you as well. So, do you mind sharing with us, Thomas, like
Mm.
um the journey leading up to the time where you actually found out that your
Yeah.
brother
When he
decided
died. Yeah.
to end
So
his, yeah, when he died,
it
yeah,
was
when he
really,
died.
I'll just tell you a quick story about the morning. I remember
Okay.
uh, the night before, my roommate and I lived in another suburban town, probably like 10 or 15 miles away from where my brother lived. He was still with my parents. He was my older brother, but he was still living with my parents at that point in time. And my roommate and I wanted to go get something to eat. And we wanted to do like this teppanyaki place, which is kind of like the stir fry right there on the table in front of you that they, Americans, we know.
With all the smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I asked my brother if he wanted to go with me, and he's like, "Nah, maybe next time. I'll see you. I'll see you. Maybe we can go next week." And so my roommate and I went. We had a blast. We ate a lot of food, drank a lot of alcohol, and went back home and went to bed relatively early. My roommate didn't have a car, so I was driving him a lot. We woke up the next day. It was a Monday. It was like any other day. We did our normal, let's get up and smoke a little bit of cannabis. I would wake up. I would kind of like do a meditation routine. I would smoke a little bit of cannabis, and then I would go back in my room and I would stretch and do like a 30 to 45-minute stretching routine. And I remember that morning, I started like in the middle of my stretching, I started feeling weird. I just like I was fine when I woke up. I was been up for about an hour and I was just fine. I wasn't dehydrated. I wasn't hungover. It was nothing like that. I was completely fine. And like in the middle of my stretching routine, I just started to feel like the ground, like uneven, and I started getting nauseous, and I couldn't really tell the difference between up and down. And so I decided to lay down. And my roommate came in. He's like, "Hey man, like I need to go to work. Are you still gonna give me a ride?" And I like couldn't see straight. And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, I'll take you." So we get up and I give him the keys. He's driving to his work and I'm in the passenger seat laying down. And I knew that like once I dropped him off, I was gonna go to my parents' house and see how my brother was doing. And I was just like, I'll figure out how to get from your work to my parents' house. Just let's get you to your work. My brother was kind of a music snob. He used to sing. He was really into like theater and plays and operas, and he sang a cappella and he was in choirs. And he was a total music snob. For some reason, he really liked this Metallica song, Nothing Else Matters, which is like a slower Metallica song. And they were kind of like a mainstream metal band. And so as we're driving down the freeway, that song comes on. And as soon as that song comes on, now this is 2001, not all smartphones aren't a thing at that point. So we're driving down the 101, the song comes on, and immediately as this song comes on, my roommate looks in the rearview mirror and says, "Hey, our other roommate, Pete, is behind us honking, trying to get us to pull over." And like, as soon as my roommate driving said, "Pete's behind us, telling us to pull over," all the nausea went away. All of it went away. And I looked at my roommate, and I had known him since first grade. And I go, "Something's wrong with my brother. I don't know what it is, but something's wrong with my brother." Pete parks, run. We pull over to the side of the road. Pete runs to us and says, "Thomas, you have a family emergency. You have to go to the social services department in your work," because I worked at a park and there was a social services department. He's like, I'll take Rich to work. You have to go. You have a family emergency." And like, as soon as he said that, we were like, Rich and I looked at each other like, "Oh my God, you're right. Like something's wrong with your brother." Pete took Rich to work. I drove to my work, and I went in and I asked my boss, like, "Hey, have you seen my parents? I was told to come here. There was a family emergency." They were like, "No." And so I walked out and I called my dad, and I heard this crying, like this like weeping. And I turned around, it was my dad, and he just told me that my brother was gone, that like Mark is gone, he's dead, he killed himself. And the police are at our house doing an investigation. Because when, I don't know how it's taken now, but anytime that there's a death, the police are always going to assume foul play until, they find enough evidence that no, this was somebody who took their own life. So we just hung out at the social services department, and we were being interviewed by different detectives, both together as a family, my mom, my dad, and I, and then separate. So I think it was just weird that there was this like weird, it's like I had it, I don't know if you're into Star Wars or anything, or if you've ever seen it, but it's like I had a tremor in the Force. Like I felt a disturbance in the Force when I started to feel nauseous. And it wasn't until this thing, like I felt like that song was my brother reaching out to me. And that's when I started to like be more grounded, and the nausea went away, and I realized I got to handle some business right now. I gotta figure out what this family emergency is. So I just always thought that was like kind of interesting, that moment in time. It's like I knew my brother was gone before he was gone, but I didn't know it was suicide. I didn't know, you know what I mean? It's just, so when I found out about it, I was just like, well, damn. All right. It made sense because there was some things that were going on in my brother's life. To me, I think one of the things that killed my brother was this lack of self, like this lack of self-awareness. Culture can be beautiful and it can also be ugly. Like, because culture tells a person who they're supposed to be, and sometimes demands who a person is supposed to be. And I think it's important for every single person on this planet to figure out who they are outside of their culture, outside of their influences, whether it's institutional influences, cultural influences, or family influences, community influences. Like, who am I as a person? Like, where do I start? Where do I end? Where do all those cultural influences begin? Because there is a difference. And I think that for my brother, he was a womanizer. He had his heart broken when he was like 20 years old. He's like, I'll never let a woman do that to me again. He was very charming. Being able to sing, it kind of like helped him with the women. He could, woo them. And he had two girlfriends for about a decade. And he had two primary girlfriends for about a decade. And then he had like all these other like conquests. on the side that he was still doing. And the two women finally, after a decade, they got smart and they left him. They were done with his shenanigans and they just bounced. And that really destroyed him. That broke him. Like, that destroyed the illusion that he had all this power and all this control. And to him, that's what makes a man. If you can have all these women, that's what makes a man, is like how many notches you have on your belt. And so I really think that, like, that was more of like a toxic cultural trait of what men are supposed to be. And my brother bought into that. And as soon as that was removed from him, he didn't know who he was. He didn't know what he was supposed to be. And he completely freaked out. And he got super, super depressed, and he lost some weight. And then ultimately he couldn't handle the emotional pain. He never reached out to anybody. He never told people. Like, we would ask him, like, hey man, are you okay? You need to talk? Like, you're not dating these women anymore. And you all know I'm fine. You know, men aren't allowed to, like, we're only allowed to have two feelings, either extreme joy or frustration and anger when we lose a sporting event. You know, it was just really stupid.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just ridiculous. And so I just really feel that, like, my brother he paid more attention and tried to be what culture told him to be, rather than figuring out who he was for himself. And I really feel that is like one of the, I can't speak for other people's, especially other cultures. I've been to Canada and I've been to Mexico. I've never been across the pond. So I can speak for America, for the United States, and say that, like, in our society, I think one of the primary issues with the mental health subject in our country is just the fact that, like, people don't have a sense of who they are.
Wow. I want to go back to the part where you said, oh, so the last time, so basically I would say it was more about the relationship that took a toll on your brother, not like financial, not like,
Well, I think that was a part of it. When
his
you have
career or things.
was a part of it. When you have two women that you're dating, you're taking them
So he
on
was dating them. He was
at
dating
the
them.
same time.
He was dating them at the same time.
Yeah, and just was able to, like, manipulate things to where, like, they kind of
And they
knew.
didn't know the existence of each other.
They knew, but, like, when somebody is in denial and you're a manipulative person, it's really good to manipulate someone's denial against themselves. And my brother was masterful at this. It was kind of impressive to watch from a distance.
We call it gaslighting, right?
Yeah. It was impressive to watch from a distance, but it was also super toxic. And that was like one of the other things that I didn't want to be around him. Like, I'm like, hey man, he didn't like that I you know, experimented with cannabis, and I was like, well, I don't like that, like, you're cheating on two women and you want me to lie for you. Like, nah, that's cool. I don't need to be a part of that. I'm not out. And, like, mom and dad were just like, oh. So I'm just like, no, I'm not gonna be a part of this. I'm gonna go hang out with stoners. So it was just
And be by myself.
and hang out by myself. And, you know,
Yeah.
it was crazy. And so when you're dating two women, if you're cheating on somebody and you're taking both of them on vacations, and you're buying them for things for Christmas and for their birthdays, and you're taking them out to dinner, that gets expensive. So I think a lot of it was that he was also digging himself a financial hole with this. So he was in the financial hole. The women left. You know, he was also working in an after school program, and he was, like, almost 30 years old. So I just think, like, he was getting to a point where I'm too old to be doing what I'm doing. I'm living at my folks' house. I just got dumped. I'm broke, and I don't have the most stable job, and that added to his depression. But I think it still stems back from, like, if he had been paying attention to what he desires in life without the need for having another person there, like, if he had passions, if he took on, if he was more proactive in finding, if he had any if he desired to create any meaning in his life, he would have been he wouldn't have been doing what he was doing with two women. He might have had a completely different job, and he would have been taking care of his finances. I think it all stems back for the fact that like he was doing what he was buying into the toxic trait of what makes a man, and he was drowning underneath it rather than just being like, hey, who am I? What do I really like? What am I about? What turns me on? What is something that I can do that I don't need anybody else? I can just
Yeah.
do it because it's like, and he just he couldn't find that. When I was, I was 24 when he died. I didn't have a great sense of self, and
Mm.
it took me a long time. I was much more um comfortable with expressing my emotions. Like I didn't care if I was sad, I'd be like, I'm sad, and I would talk about
Yeah.
it. But I still had a lack of confidence. I still had I just didn't. I knew things. I had passions, and there are things that I wanted to do, but I didn't really have the confidence to do it. I didn't. I felt like I didn't have. I love my parents. They gave me compassion and they gave me empathy, but they weren't. Neither of them were the wizards that I needed that taught me how to be a person and how to handle all of my business and or how to find myself. And so I had to go on this long journey. Probably about 6 years after my brother's death, I went into therapy. And that was really where I started to like peel the onion of everything that I was and understand like these little micro traumas that I had that just everybody has just by being in a community, like a small community of family, and like the little things that we do to each other that aren't massive transgressions, but there's still things that like cut into our emotional fabric and make you know a negative impact on us as we grow up. And so I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot. I was able to look at my parents and understand why I was upset with them, but understand where they came from. And it was really through my time with my therapist that um, led me to eventually, riding my bike across the country. I knew I had a mission. I met my friend Zach, and when I found out that he had lost his brother to suicide, I knew that there was something more to our friendship. We weren't just gonna like, hey man, you're cool, let's play basketball and let's go out and drink beers and let's go out and chase babes. Like I knew there was something more. I was like, I'd never met anybody that had lost somebody to suicide, and if I did, they never shared that with me. So I knew that there
Yeah.
was something, there was a reason that brought Zach and I. There was something that brought Zach and I together, and we, when we decided that we were going to do this bike ride, it started with a conversation at a bar, and then 6 months later, 7 months later, I was like, all right, I'm doing this. We're doing this. You want to do it? And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. I was like, okay, we're doing this. And then it took us 13 months to figure it out before we started. But I just always knew I've always been kind of like a creative person. I've always been like mission driven. There's always something that I can't just, to me, I have to like, my greatest form of like meditation is like doing something, working with my hands and like doing and getting into a rhythm. And I just, I'm always kind of like wanting to work towards something. And now it's like whether or not it's a new project at work, or even when I'm not at work. I have a full-time job now. I work at a library. But when I get home, like, okay, now I'm going to do the thing that I'm really passionate about. I'm going to write. I'm going to work on podcasts, and I want to be creative. And for me, my thing is where I find meaning is just in the art of creating something. And I don't do it with this idea of I'm going to make a lot of money. It's like air. If I don't do it, I will die. And I felt like before I went into therapy, I was slowly dying because I had all these things that I wanted to do, but because I didn't have any true understanding of all of who I am, and I didn't have any understanding of why I was getting sad, that it wasn't until I had somebody help me navigate myself and navigate my own consciousness to help and to show me how to do it myself, that I was able to, like, there's all these things that I want to do and I don't have to wait for other people to do them. I should just start doing them. I think that was like one of my biggest things, or why I was like, my lack of confidence is I was very, very codependent. I always wanted to like do things, but I wanted to do them with other people. And there was a buddy that I lived with, Rich, my roommate, like for the longest time, like we were both movie nerds. And I was like, let's start writing scripts, and let's get like a little video camera and just start shooting stuff. And he didn't have as much of the motivation that I did. And I just always wanted to do it. And once him and I deviated from one another, I just was like, I can do this stuff myself. And, writing a book is a very solitary act. It's nice to have people to read your stuff, even before you publish, not just like editors, but like if you have a community of other people that like to write, it's important to share your work. I didn't do that this time, but I learned the importance of that during writing the book, the whole process of that. Like, it wasn't until the end that I finally had people reading and giving me some feedback, which was perfect. But other than that, like, I don't need somebody to work with me to like write something. I can start writing, and then with the internet, I could find people that, that might be willing to read my stuff. And then I would also have to like read their stuff and reciprocate that. But it took me a long time to realize that if there's something that I want to do, I should just go do it. And don't do it for celebrity. Don't do it for
Validate.
validation. Don't even do it for money. Like, if you have the desire to do something, just go do it. Yeah, do it, and you'll feel better about yourself. You'll probably learn a lot about yourself, and not only that, but like it's one of the reasons. It's kind of like ingrained in the bike ride and in my own personal philosophy, is that like one of the greatest tools for self-awareness is the act of art and creativity, is just like building something, writing something. The art of conversation and having conversations with people is just, the more you play with what in the creative realm, whatever it may be, I think that you start to understand not only a little bit about you, but about the world that you live in. To me, I think that when I go to a concert or when I go see a movie, that there's a difference between adoration and inspiration. Like, if you're witnessing somebody perform, and it gives you a buzz almost. You feel it, you connect with it for whatever reason. Maybe it reminds you of a time period. Maybe it reminds you of something that you've experienced. Or it touches you on an emotional level. That is them providing like energy to you. They're giving you this energy. At the onset, I feel like it's more of like inspirational energy. But your job as an audience member is then go and take that energy and make something beautiful yourself. And if you don't do that, you waste that energy and it becomes more adoration. And at that point, you're not really, it's more of like, oh, like that person's amazing and they're great and I could never do that. And I just think that's ridiculous. Yeah, it may not be as like amazing as the thing that you're being inspired by, but I don't think that should stop you from then going and mucking around and creating your own thing, whatever that is. Like, if you're inspired by a band, that doesn't mean you have to go out and make music. You can go and weave a basket.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Because you take that inspiration and then you do it. It's like 'cause you're inspired. They're doing something with their creativity. And you're also taking that and you're seeing somebody actually do it and do it at their best. And when you're at it, you're actually adoring them. And then you take it, oh, what is it about them that I can turn that inwards and then I can do it and make something out of myself as well.
And that's something like when
I,
people read
I
when
learned that.
yeah, and I hope that when people read the book that the way that I formatted it's kind of like an invitation to like, hey, not everybody can quit their job and ride their bicycle across the country, whether for fun or to bring awareness to a topic. Not everybody can do that, but I want everybody to look at their life as if it's it's a story. Your life is a story. From cradle to grave, it's your life is the story of you. And in between, you have these like little micro stories that happen that like one action, one event leads to the next, just like in a movie, just like in a book, but it's your story. So I like I use my journey as an invitation for others to look at to look at themselves and look at the things that they've gone through and where they're at and where they want to be and how they can get a little bit closer to where they want to be, despite where they are right now and how far away it might be from the idea in their head. And just to like to look at you, you're the main character in the story of you. So, be present, pay attention to your circle of influence and understand why you're inspired by the things that you're inspired, and turn around and do something amazing. And it can be just being, I mean, like, again, you don't have to quit your job and ride your bike across any country. Even the most mundane, routine day can have adventure if you just learn to look at it from a different vantage point, in a different perspective. I hope anybody who reads the book, I hope that they can adopt that perception and just try to bring some magic into their own life.
No, I know a lot of listeners who might be saying that, okay, it's easy for Thomas to say, I want to do something on my own. I want to pursue this, that. But I don't know how to start. So tell us, Thomas, what was the planning that was involved before you started your bicycle ride?
Well, so I kind of like inspired Zach at the bar to do the bike ride the night that we had the conversation, because one of the things that I did is that I'm not a religious person. My parents' church is very, very progressive. They're open to other faiths. They are all about social justice. They're open and affirming to people of other sexual orientation, and they believe that we should take care of the planet. So my parents decided that, like, their minister at the time was like, I'm gonna walk from Phoenix to Washington, D.C., and I'm gonna find people who don't agree with me, and then I'm gonna try to have a conversation with those people, and then like find out the things about our faith that we do agree about, and then start a relationship from there. So I was just like, man, I'm not Christian, but that sounds like a rad idea. Can I go with? And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, you totally go with. But we have a filmmaker who's gonna like document everything, and I know that you want to get into film. Do you want to be his assistant? So I didn't really walk. I walked backwards a lot, but then I did have a support vehicle, and I traveled with them across the country for 5 months. So that kind of like gave me the bug to like do something like travel again like that. And so when I was telling Zach about this, he's like, let's ride our bikes across the country for our brothers. I was like, all right, hell yeah, let's do it. That's why we're supposed to do this. So what it just came down to, we needed to know where we're going to begin and where we're going to end. So we chose the Golden Gate Bridge because there's a documentary called The Bridge about people that have gone to the Golden Gate in San Francisco to jump off and end their lives. So we felt that that was an important place to start
Mm.
at. And then we were like, where do we want to end? And I loved Alex Grey and his art. And Alex Grey wrote a book called The Power of Art. His whole philosophy about like what I was talking about, the importance that art, either as a witness, as an audience, or as the creator, the artist themselves, can help heal, can heal the world, can heal an individual, can heal a community. So I was like, let's end at the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. So we're going to start at a place that is synonymous with people ending their lives, and let's end at a place that is synonymous with transforming your life through art and creativity. So we had this idea of this is where we're going to start. And then we started writing kind of like our philosophy and the things that we wanted to do. We ended up partnering with a local mental health facility, and they were like, "Yeah, we love this idea. We would love to support you." And what we had them do is that they just put us under their 501c3. So anybody that donated to us went through like their bank account, and that person who donated would get a tax write-off. So that kind of like helped us without creating our own nonprofit. We could just like be under the banner of a mental health facility. So we had an idea, we had a beginning, we had an ending, and we had a home base. So then we just had to create a route. And so we just started doing research. We went to the two biggest suicide awareness prevention organizations websites, American Association of Suicidology, and then American Foundation of American, I can't even think of it. It's AFSP, American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, AFSP. So we went to both of those
Right.
websites, and we just started like, and both of those websites had links and contact information to other crisis centers that had groups for like support groups for suicide loss survivors. So suicide loss survivor is someone who lost someone to suicide. So they had like this infrastructure of all these different places across the country where there were support groups. So then we just started calling people. Like I didn't have a full-time job at the time. But I was working 6 days a week to get work 38 hours. So I would wake up, and I kind of worked from like 2 a.m. till 8 p.m. So I'd wake up super early in the morning, and I would just start making cold calls, and I would tell them what we wanted to do. And the people that were interested, we just started to create a route from that. And we didn't do a straight line. We did like a giant W through the country. And that's why it was 7,000 miles, because we just wanted to hit
Wow.
as many places. We're like, if we're gonna do this, we're not gonna like, we may never have a chance to do this again. So like, let's go to as many places as possible. In hindsight, that was a little nutty, you know,
Oh
because like,
yeah. Hearing from you, like yeah, okay.
I mean, we had a support group, we had a support van, we had a support vehicle in case one of us got injured. So the way that we did it, it's not like both of us rode next to each other 7,000 miles, though, like each. That would have been amazing. But for us, like the bike ride was a little bit of a gimmick, but we wanted to talk to other people. We wanted to learn as much as we possibly could from other people's experiences and really get an idea of like what was going on. Right, we rode, once we were done with California, we were like, we need to have a support vehicle. We tried to raise money to like purchase a support vehicle and then raise enough money to pay somebody to like travel with us for 7 months. We didn't raise that kind of money though. So by the time we got back to Arizona, I just took my truck. And what we would do is we would rotate. Like he would ride one day and I would drive, and then he would drive the next day and I would ride. And this was beneficial because when we came back to Arizona, he had to have oral surgery on like an infected tooth. So he couldn't ride for an entire week. I couldn't ride for an entire week. If that would have happened without a vehicle, we would have been dead in the water. We wouldn't have been able to travel for an entire week until he was better. So he was good enough to drive a car, but he wasn't good enough to like be on a bike getting beat up by the elements of the Arizona sun, riding up and down big mountains and stuff like that. So it was really important to like have that support vehicle. But I just started making cold calls. I called hundreds of people, and some people didn't respond. Some people were like, no, we don't want to do that. And then other people just totally like, yeah, that sounds amazing. So based on the people that said yes, we started to create a schedule. How many miles could we possibly ride in one day to like get from one place to another? We just, day one, we have to ride from point A to point B. Day two, we got to ride from point A to point B. We're going to rest on day three. We have another event in the same town, so we're going to rest on that day. We'll have 2 days off, and then we're on day 6. We're going to ride this many. So I knew that like we couldn't ride every single day. That we needed at least 2 days off a week, and we'd also decided like, hey, we're going through some of these amazing cities, and like let's pick a few cities that when we get there after our event, we hang out for 4 or 5 days and just kind of like, we could rest, get some recovery. A cross country bike ride that, could take like 90 days to do ended up turning into like 7 months. But like we had it scheduled. We had a 7-month schedule. It took us 3 months to like figure it out, and even when we started the bike ride, we still hadn't made contact with the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. They didn't know we were coming.
You were going based on faith.
we were, and so we like, hey, if we can't ever get in touch with them, and the last day we ride our bikes, we'll just knock on the door because it's an art retreat center. There's a lot of people that work there. We'll just tell them, hey, this is our story. We just rode 7 months, 7,000 miles across the United States. This is why we did it. This is why we came here. Do you guys have a room for rent? Like if that's what we were, expecting to do. That's not how it turned out. What happened was that we were meeting with like a lot of different people across the country too. Originally, I wanted to do a documentary, but that got a little bit difficult because of all like we had speaking engagements where we had to engage with the public. We're riding our bikes. You're kind of like living on the road. So it got really hard to like, I'm also going to be a filmmaker at the same time. But I still interviewed a lot of people. I interviewed people who lost loved ones to suicide. I interviewed artists. I interviewed therapists. I interviewed lawmakers. One of the places that we interviewed was, and this was like in the early stages of, in 2012, there was still a big stigma against psychedelics in the United States. Psilocybin mushroom, ayahuasca, all that stuff. Still a big taboo on it. But there was an organization in Santa Cruz called MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. And so we wanted to record an interview with them. And the person that we interviewed was like their in charge of outreach and also their publicity. This guy knew Alex and Allyson Grey, because Alex and Allyson Grey, all of their art is inspired by psychedelic experiences. And if you see Alex Grey's art, you'll totally see. So Brad Burge is the person that we interviewed at MAPS. He's like, you guys haven't contacted? I was like, we called, but we haven't made contact. They don't know we're coming. He's like, you guys are crazy. He's like, I'm gonna send him an email. We're gonna make sure you guys are taken care of. So this was in Santa Cruz. This is like probably like we had this interview before we even started the bike ride. We drove out to California and hung out like a week just so that we get some stuff, because we knew that we wouldn't have time while we're riding. So by the time I get back to Phoenix, Arizona, and Zach is here, he's got to get oral surgery. He goes to his dentist. So we have a few days of rest. I get this email from Allyson Grey. Alex's wife, and she's responding to Brad's email, and she's like, "Hey, we would love to have you. We can't wait for you to come. Here is our hospitality and event coordinator, Sharon Steluto. Just be in contact with her, and she'll take care of all of your arrangements." So then I just emailed Sharon once a month. So, hey, you haven't forgot about us, right? We're
Yeah.
in
We're there. We're on the way.
we're in Kansas. Crazy enough, Sharon is now my partner. She now lives here, and
No
she
way.
now lives here.
Beautiful how.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
like,
so it
oh
was
God, I'm
just
so happy for you.
yeah. It was wild. It was just, but like
You should definitely do up a documentary, like really.
yeah. I mean, so I had all this information, and that's just what it does. Like, you have to be willing to hear no from people. And all to me, when you're figuring stuff out and you're going and you're doing something, like, there are people out there that are willing to help you, and there's people that don't care. So you just have to figure out. And when somebody says no, at first it's kind of heartbreaking. You're like, "Ah, man, that sucks." But all that's doing is eliminating the people that you need to look for, right? Like, that you never have to ask that person for help again because they already said
Yeah.
no. So eliminate them from your search and keep going. And it's crazy. Like, I didn't even know maps existed. There was one day I just finished work. I'd spent all day, all morning, cold calling people and working on our website, doing all like the infrastructure stuff that I needed to do. And then I went to work, and on my way home from work, I was exhausted. I had a bunch of like flyers in my truck, and I drove past this coffee shop I had never been for, and I totally passed it. And I was like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm going to turn around. They look like they were open. I'm going to go put some flyers in there to advertise the bike ride. So I turn around and I go back. I walk in, and I'm looking for places to put the flyers, and there's this woman, and she works there, and she's like, you trying to put flyers up on a cork board? And I was like, yeah. She's like, yeah, we don't do that. Sorry. But what do you want to advertise? And I gave her the flyer, and she's like, this sounds amazing. Do you want to meet up? Like, maybe like in a few, like, couple days from now, and we could talk further about this, and maybe there's some things that I could do to help you. I was like, yeah, sure. And it was when we met up a few days later, she's the one that told me about maps. Now, if I didn't turn around that day that I was tired and go in there and have that random conversation, I would have never met with her to learn about maps. And if I hadn't talked to maps, like, we wouldn't have been set up at the Chapel of Sacred Mirror. So it's like, you have to, like, and that's what I mean. Like, our life, our journey is a story, and one happy accident can lead to something else. And I think it's just as long as you're aware of these things when they're happening, or like, to me, I look back on that conversation with Andrea fondly, because she was the first link in the chain to get me to Sharon. If I didn't have the conversation,
I wanted to ask about Sharon.
so like, it's just, I think that it's important that we pay attention to what is happening around us. So, like I said, you don't have to, like, if you want to get into pottery, go to the places where pottery is being made. Talk to people who make pottery. You just have to put yourself out there. So, and it may take 5 years until somebody actually allows you to, like, use their equipment, you know what I mean? Or even wants to take you in as a student. Like, think about it. I had this book that I published. I'm going to show you. I don't know if you show video, but here's my book. 2012,
Yes,
Bicycle Odyssey.
it's gonna be a video.
All right?
Yes.
So I wrote this book, and I published it in 2000. And I published it a month ago. May 29th is when it was published. This whole book, I've always wanted to write. I wanted to write screenplays. I wanted to write books. I was always terrified. I knew I had the creative mindset, but I just didn't have the technical aspect. This book would not be possible if Zach and I did not have that conversation that gave us the idea to do the bike ride in June 2010. All right. We have the conversation in 2010, June 2010, February 2011. We decide we're going to do it. We take 13 months to plan this thing, and in March 1st of 2012, we go on a bike ride. We end the bike ride September 29th, 2012, or September 27th, 2012. I decide to take like a month and a half to get home, and I just drive around the country, kind of like process things. And I start writing the book in 2013, and it took me 12 years to learn how to write.
10 years. 12, yeah.
12 years, because like I didn't have a lot of confidence in my ability to write literature. You know, like this book is probably like draft 7. And I would go to work, and I would do my job, and then I would come home, and I would the first few drafts I spent at coffee shops until they kicked me out. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote, and a lot of it was garbage. So much of it was garbage. You know, and I let other people read it, and they're like, man, there's a lot. You know, and you have to, when you decide that you want to learn something, you have to be willing to be terrible at it. You're not going to just be like, oh, I want to make clay, or I want to learn the guitar, and think that you're going to pick it up and you're going to be amazing. That's not going to happen. You have to allow yourself to be terrible at it. You have to allow yourself to make mistakes. You have to allow, people to say, no, I don't want to help you. But you have to keep asking, because you're going to find somebody who's like, yeah, I'll totally help you. And then when you get good at that, just remember, other people helped you. So when somebody else comes and says like, hey, I want to learn how to basket weave. I want to learn how to make clay pots. I want to learn how to paint. I want to learn how to use Photoshop. I want to learn how to write a book. You can now be there because you went through the journey of failing and sucking and finding teachers and losing teachers and finding new teachers to finally get something that you're proud of, that you can turn around and say like, yeah, I want to help you now. You just have to allow yourself to go on the journey. And let me tell you, the journey's a pain in the ass. It's not fun. And a lot of it's boring, but you have to be willing. There were so many times, like as we were going across the country, and like say I was the driver for the day, you just sit there for 8 hours and you leapfrog the person that's riding their bike, and you have to pay attention for them. You can't just like sit there and read a book and like forget where you are. You have to like pay attention, because they need you for food. They need you for water. They need you if they get injured. You're now like, as a support driver, you're responsible for the person who's riding their bike. You're responsible for their life. And you have to take care of them. But you're sitting there just kind of like, all right, okay, he just rode past me. I'm going to wait here for about 15 minutes, let him get a few more miles down the road, and then I'm going to drive, go find him, and then drive like 2 miles ahead of him, and then wait for him to leapfrog me. And because sometimes he'll pull up behind me and be like, I need to refill my water. And you just have to be there. And those days were boring. And then you have the days that aren't boring. They're too stimulating, because you're the one on the bike, but you're going up a damn mountain. It's July and you're in Georgia, and it's 112 degrees and 95% humidity. And it's like no amount of water you drink, and there's like no cloud in sight, and the sun is just beaming down on you. And I swear, like as soon as I drank water, it was coming right out my pores. Like I could not drink enough water.
Oh my God.
But that's part of the journey.
I love it. Wow, how can people get your book?
It's on Amazon. If you go to risephoenix.org, that's my main website. You'll be able to get to the book. You'll be able to get to my social media account. I do post a little bit on our Facebook. Most of the stuff is on our Instagram. But from from the website, risephoenix.org, you're going to be able to find the book. It's on Amazon. I don't know if like how Amazon works outside of the country. I do know that it's available in other for other countries, but you can get to our social media. You could also get to the podcasts that I do. I haven't done Inner Monologue in a while. That's the conversational interview show, but I have like 300
That's
episodes on our. I have
no way.
300.
That's my next question. Like,
Yeah.
talk to us a bit about your podcast.
Yeah, Inner
So
Monologue was born out of the fact that like writing is very lonely, and I wanted to talk to people. So I just started.
same.
I started Inner Monologue so that I could just have conversations with people while I was still working on the book. I've got over 300 episodes on that. It got a little
Wow.
exhausting because like I was like recording. I would bank like 30 episodes or 30 conversations, take a month off, but keep posting a new episode, every week.
Right.
And I was doing it I had it for about 5 years, a new episode every single week. Every Monday, boom, a new Inner Monologue podcast came up. So I've got like over 300 episodes that people can go through. And then right now I'm recording one called Stages. It's more of like an audio diary where I navigate. My mom died last year, and I started recording that about 6 months later. It's just me navigating my grief, navigating my own mental health, and also just kind of the different stages that I'm experiencing. I became like a caretaker for my father. I love him to death, but he's not the easiest person. I just talk about getting older and things hurting all the time, and talk about art and creativity, and I talk about the book a little bit. But it's more of like a verbal diary, and they're not like Inner Monologue episodes are up to an hour and a half. Stages are maybe 20 minutes long. It's just me talking, and sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're depressing, and sometimes they're just I'm just checking in. I post those every 2 weeks, but my book is my passion. I want to do a follow-up to 2012, which would be more of like a philosophical interpretation of mental health. And I am also working on some fictional short stories because my heart is in sci-fi and fiction. I figure I'm on this planet. I'm privileged enough to have access to a computer, and to a functioning mind. So I'm going to use my privilege to my benefit, and hopefully, that'll inspire other people who read my words.
Wow, wow. I am rooting for you all the way from Malaysia.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it.
Thomas, yeah, I really appreciate when you were talking, it's like I am just in awe. I imagine everything that you said, and it's like it took so much for you to get to where you are right now, and me talking to different people as well is it's therapeutic, and at the same time life can be boring.
Yeah.
And I'm drawing inspiration from these different people. Like I just had yesterday a person who was no longer in a bondage to porn, sex addiction. So it's like, and now today I'm talking to somebody who actually lost people to somebody to suicide, and I'm just happy and lucky to be here
Yeah.
today, to be breathing.
Yeah. I mean, we all have a story, and we can all learn from each other's story. Or we could also find comfort because we think that we're the only ones with that experience. And then you hear somebody on a podcast talk about something that you've gone through. And even though you never met that person, you might feel a little like there's at least somebody out there that gets it. And I think that's important. I think it's important for all of us to continue to share our stories. And thank you for being somebody that gives people space to do that.
You just made my day. Oh, Thomas, few more questions. What is your heart's greatest wish?
My heart's greatest wish that everybody goes on a journey of self-discovery, and that there's enough of us that find passion and meaning and altruism and that there's enough of us that use that passion to take care of our environment, help those that are in need, feed those who are hungry, clothe those who are naked, and provide shelter to those that are on the streets, and that we could all just learn how to take care of each other, because we're all going through the same crazy stuff. You may not look like me, but you're still my brother, my sister, and my sibling.
That's right. That's beautiful. Thank you. We're all connected
Yeah,
at the end of the show.
yeah. I mean, we're all stuck here on this rock, hurtling through the void.
Yeah. Yes, you got it. Do you have a mantra that you live by?
Know thyself.
Is there anything that keeps you up at night, or do you sleep well?
It's sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, I get stressed. I think like having to take care of my father. I just think about that I mean, I had to learn everything about his finances. My parents' house, when it was just the two of them, was a matriarchal house. My mom ran
Oh,
everything. My dad did all like the heavy lifting and all like the outside yard work. But my mom knew what bills
the
had to be
ins and outs,
paid, when they had to be paid, what accounts they
down
were
to
coming from.
the
And
cents.
so I
Yeah.
had to learn all that. And I'm just like, ugh. And like my mom, it's been 13 months since my mom's been gone. And like just today, before we started recording, like I found out another bill that he had, and I was like, are you
Are you?
serious? It's like one of those that he only has to pay like twice a year. So like I'm just like, dude, all right, tomorrow I'll go over and I'll call the insurance company for you and we'll ask why this is so astronomical. So it's just things like that that I've had, and that kind of like keeps me up at night. But like other than that, like sometimes when I work 40 hours a week now at this library, and I'm a supervisor, and when I get off work, I go to the gym and I try to work out to take care of my body, because I'm getting older and I need to take care of myself. And then after that, I come home, I eat dinner, and I try to give myself 4 or 5 nights of the week, like that's going to be dedicated to my craft. I'm gonna write. I'm gonna work on the new project that I'm working on. And I'll sit there and it will take me an hour, 2 hours before I can even get a sentence out. Sometimes one of my favorite quotes is by Taika Waititi. Sometimes writing is sitting in front of your laptop, staring at a blank screen for 6 hours, and then crying and closing it. And that's writing. And that's sometimes what it is. And like for me, but like when I'm going and I got a lot in me and it's just coming out, it usually takes me an hour or two to calm down and calm my brain down. And I'll be like, oh, it's 1 a.m. Like I have to be at work at 8 a.m. So I need to like take a shower and get in bed. And then like my phone's right next to my head. I have notes on my phone. I'll go in there and I'll just start I'm going to bed. I'm going to sleep. And then like boom, this flash of like this idea comes in and I'll just write it out. And then I put my phone down and then another one comes and I'll write it down. I'll do that till like 3 a.m. until my brain, I'm just too exhausted. So like that keeps me up sometimes, just being creative. Like not once, like once you tap the well, you can't like plug it up. Like it wants to come. That's another thing. Stress about my father, and then sometimes just like lightning bolts of creativity will just keep me up.
What a fun person you are. Okay, so last question. If you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening and the world as your legacy, what would it be?
Man, that's a great question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. Although, like, I just think that it's important. Look, this is the importance of self-awareness. Each of us is born, no matter how privileged we are or how privileged we aren't. We're born with a map, all right? And if you don't know who you are, you don't know where to start on the map. There is this gold waiting for you in the world, and that gold could be wisdom. That gold could be mission. It could be passion. It could be purpose. It could be peace. But if you don't know where you're starting on the map, you're never going to get to the goal. Figure out who you are outside of what the world is telling you who to be. It's your one job here
Beautiful.
on this planet.
One job. You have one. Just
Who
one.
are you?
Thomas, you have been incredible. And there you have it, guys. You heard it from Thomas Brown himself. Before we close off, Thomas, I'd like to thank you personally for the work that you're doing for the world and for advancing every step of the way despite the challenges, creating trails for those that will come after you. Our listeners, this has been that one podcast with that controversial name, You're Worthless. Read that again. The juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, if you find yourself thinking that you are worthless, you're probably not alone. But more importantly, ask yourself a level deeper. If I'm worthless, then why the heck am I here? It is because your soul have chosen to be here energetically all the way from the ethers, and for that reason itself, you are worthy and you are enough. This has been Thomas Brown, your guest of the day, and Nick Nieras, your host, signing off. Thank you so much, Thomas, for your time.
Thank you, Nicolette.